Hello and welcome to the Spine and Nerve Podcast. My name is Dr. Brian Joves, and today we have the distinguished pleasure to welcome Dr. Raman Gurai back to the show. It's been a while since you've been on. Dr. Gurai, thank you for joining me today.
I'm glad to be back. Looking forward to this one. It's been in the works for a while, so it's nice to get back on the horn.
Yeah, well, we've talked about many different aspects of PM&R, interventional spine, musculoskeletal medicine with you on in the past. But today I wanted to actually talk about you and your story and kind of what has brought you to where you are today as a physician. But maybe more importantly, all of the steps that got you here along the way. So if you would be so kind, maybe give us the comic book #1 origin story of what brought you into medicine and kind of how we started on this journey.
Yeah. Well, first off, let me compliment you on the topic of today's podcast. It's one of my favorite topics myself. I No, all kidding aside, I grew up. So I grew up in the Bay Area, and not too far from you, actually. I grew up in San Jose. You grew up in Hayward, right? Or in Union
Hayward,
City.
Union City, yeah.
That's right. So we're not too far away. And I did my undergrad there at. I stayed in the Bay Area. I stayed over at Cal. Where'd you go to undergrad, by the way? I forget. You
UC
went to
Davis.
Yeah, you were at Davis. We're not too far. And so that was the start. I think, what got me into medicine, I think at that point I was still kind of, honestly, I don't know what you were thinking about doing besides medicine. I don't know if you thought about anything else, but at that point I grew up in San Jose. We grew up in the Bay Area. The tech world is huge there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the considerations. And so that was decided between a couple of different fields, and those were the two: medicine and tech. And ultimately, I decided on medicine. And like, we can circle back, but I went the overarching theme. I went to the Caribbean, St. George, thereafter after Cal, and spent a couple of years out there. And then the way that works there, you spend 2 years in the Caribbean doing your book studies, and then a couple of years doing rotations throughout the states. Followed that up with an internship in Brooklyn and New York, and then headed out to residency at the West LA UCLA program down in Southern California, and I did my fellowship there as well, and left in 2015. Left Southern California 2015. 2016, end of 2015, early 2016, I started my first job out of fellowship, and that was with Kaiser and Martinez. I joined a great department there, and spent a couple years working there. I met my current wife, who in the Bay Area, and then she brought me out to Sacramento when I needed a new job. And Dr. and yourself were so gracious to bring me on. So, and I've been here since.
Oh man, before we got started, you said you were pretty sure you could tell your whole story in a very short time. I didn't realize you meant 3.5 minutes in we'd be done with the story already.
No, I mean, that's the overarching. You might want to go back, like, what got you.
Yeah, no. Well, so I mean, it's interesting you brought up, right? I mean, when we were growing up in the Bay Area, you brought up the tech versus medicine. Just so everybody understands. I mean, we were in high school in the late '90s, and so I mean, literally as you're getting out of high school at that time, I mean, this is the .com boom, right? And so like half of the kids that I went to school with that were in the same AP classes that we were all in and doing all of those same things. Half of them went off over summer and made six figures, working at a tech startup, doing God knows what. So I think it takes a very special person, or at least a special calling, to look at that, see that, stay in the Bay Area and see it, right? I mean, you were at Cal, in the thick of seeing all of what was to be about the future with the .com era, coming in and then bursting, but the whole startup landscape, and then being like, what, I think medicine's my calling.
No, that's not an understatement. Off the freeway, the exit next to mine, after mine, was called Silicon Valley Road. IBM is down the street, and those things, and that original Apple shop is 15 minutes from my home. So no, it was a very big influence. And look past that and look towards medicine was no. It didn't go without thought, right? But I think when I go back to why I picked medicine, I've always been around medicine, not through family, but I like to say I was a clumsy kid. So I was born with congenital torticollis, actually, and so they had to release mine when I was like in second grade. I was in and out of the ERs, corneal abrasions, corneal abrasions. Had a I had second, third degree burns when I was a kid, and I was in and out of the hospital. I really admired physicians. I and kind of developed a deep admiration for for the profession. I think, and that stuck with me. And so I remember when I was younger, I thought, okay, I want to be a physician. I always looked up to the field actually. So and then when I got into high school, I don't know if I told you the story, but I so I blew up my knee playing basketball. It was against San Jose High, I think it was, and so I tore my ACL, my meniscus, and the orthopedic doctor that fixed my knee up, man, his bedside manner was terrible. I thought I could be better than this guy. No, I really, that's what I thought. It's like, no way, I could be better than this guy. And so, I kind of kept. So that's when I kind of really kind of started focusing in, honing in a little bit. And then like I said, when I got to Cal, I kind of got a little double-minded. Thought, okay, well, is this something I really want to do? The track of it. Um, I had taken AP, the computer science classes in high school. I was pretty good at it. I even took the WIDO courses over at Cal, and I did well there, aced those, and so I think I could have done it. But I think ultimately what I decided was, um, yeah, I could have made a lot of money in tech and had a successful career. But what I've enjoyed it, what I've had a passion for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't think I would have. I don't know how you felt, or if you consider other fields. That was my deciding factor. I think at the end of the day, at the end of my career, I'm going to look back and say, did I, on a day-to-day basis, did I do something that I thought was worthwhile?
Yeah.
Uh, and that's ultimate. And then I picked medicine. I was a little undecided for a while there, which kind of I think hindered my grades and my MCAT, and I think that's the next step of explaining why I ended up in the Caribbean. But that was my thought process in
What
school.
did what did you what did you major in at Berkeley?
Yeah, I did molecular cell and biology, molecular cell biology.
Right on.
The emphasis in neuroscience. It all came back.
Yeah.
It all comes
Yeah,
back, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Everything's full circle.
yeah,
My favorite memory of Berkeley, of my time, being down there, which was always, visiting friends, which means I wasn't doing anything
yeah,
productive,
yeah.
is actually the Denny's. That's right off of 80.
Yep.
For whatever reason, that's the thing I remember most about my time in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Eating Grand Slam breakfast at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's good. Yeah, right. No, I actually had a lot of. It's a funny story. I have a lot of good stories and times about Davis. A lot of my buddies went there, and so I always kind of lamented, "Ah, I should have just ended up at Davis." But so that's funny that you share your fond memories of Berkeley. I remember Davis quite well. But
So you ended up going down to the Caribbean. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I think we have a lot of listeners that are, maybe have been through a similar situation, or maybe that's something that they're thinking about pursuing. Like, tell us about the experience of learning everything there is to know about medicine while having a beach outside.
yeah, right. So I think the decision was, if truthfully, if I can go back, the decision was probably a little short-sighted, right? I got a little down on myself. I've looked at my grade point average, and it was like somewhere around a 3, and my MCAT was like a sub 30, and I thought, I knew it wasn't good enough to get into a U.S. school at that time. I could have done a post-bac program and retaken the MCAT and increased my scores for sure. I think this is where I got it. Was a hasty decision. I thought, I looked at the road. I thought it's a long road anyway. I don't want to spend another 2 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years doing extra school. Let me just get this started. And so I had looked into, I had people I had known about the Caribbean. And if I'm really honest, though, the funny thing is I always kind of looked at the Caribbean. I thought, oh man, it's like second cut, and that's just the honest truth, right? I think people, it's a second grade track, and so. But I ended up going that track, and again, that decision was a little short-sighted, right? I think if I could go back, I probably would have told myself, "Hey, take your time, do a post-bac program." I had friends who were doing post-bac programs, like Rosalind Franklin over at Drexel, I think, as well. If you meet a certain a grade point average, and you get right in, and I think that would have been the right route, or just do the post-bac program, master's program, increase your grades, and take the MCAT again. Take your time. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that would be my advice to somebody looking to go overseas. There's nothing wrong with going to the Caribbean if ultimately that's what you decide to do. It's just a harder route in my mind. I think it's easy to get in, it's hard to get out, and and so and so it's not that I regret going there. It just was just a harder route, and
Mm.
ultimately, I'm happy where I'm at, and I accomplished what I wanted to. So it's hard for me to lament my route
Yeah.
because it ended up really well. I remember telling myself in the Caribbean, if it ends up well, all's well that ends well, then I'll have no problem that I have gone there. And truthfully, it did. It worked out great. So I have no qualms about it. It's just if I could go back and make it easier on myself, I would. And it's way easier. It's harder to get in initially to the allopathic or the MD route, but do it. I mean, the other route I hear people talk about is the DO route, and people ask me, "Well, would you go to the DO route?" And I said, that's also a little bit more difficult as well. There's some local geography that plays in. Like, for example, Truro, we know in Vallejo,
Hmm.
they have good inroads with some of the programs here, including Davis. So they have a track record, decades of students going in and setting a precedent and creating a relationship. There's the same program, the same story for Western down in Southern California, or NICOM in New York has a great reputation. But outside of the local geographic regions, it's tough to kind of to send out your application. I think nationally, maybe I can't, I wouldn't. That's where I remember thinking about that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of it too is the timing, right? I mean, we're thinking obviously, we're talking 13, 14 years ago. I mean, I think because of people like yourself, because of, many of the, great deals that we've worked with over time, because of so many people that have gone through that path and been able to achieve such great things, been able to become such phenomenal physicians. I do think that things are a little different now than they were back then, right? I mean, we're talking applying in, literally almost 20 years ago at this point, when I know makes it feel really old, right? But I mean, but it was different back then. And I think, like I said, because of people like you, because of, many of the people that we've had the pleasure of working with that were also, graduates from the Caribbean, went to DO schools, have done such great things, paved the path. I think that people are facing a much different situation these days. I hope. I mean,
Yeah,
we're not program directors, so I don't
yeah.
know. I can't say I'll let you into my program, but
I doubt that that's, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Maybe that's a little bit true for the future generations. I would imagine it still kind of holds true what I said. It's harder to, it's a lot harder to come back. And, it's easy to get in the Caribbean, hard to come back. I think maybe those roads are being built to make it easier, but, and rightfully so. I always tell people, the top of the cream of the crop in the Caribbean school I went to, they were really good students. I thought to myself, like, why are these people um, you know, at some of the U.S. schools? I kind of felt that way about myself, but I know the decision I made. But it was always interesting to hear other people's stories who I knew were really smart. I've been around smart people all my life. We all have, right? And we know who belongs where. And so the cream of the crop is just as good as anybody else. I think the middle grade students and lower, that's where the comment, it falls off. But ultimately, I think I would still say it's better to put your work in at the beginning and then rather than go through that tough path of the Caribbean. So I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean, I really worked hard to try to dig my way out. And so, um, at the risk of yeah, it sound like I'm bragging or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. But I had to double board 99s just to get a sniff at like some of the the decent interviews and programs, and so I had to work really hard, get a good scores, and not that those matter now, so I don't mind saying, but that's what brought me out of that hole that I dug for myself. Does that make sense?
yeah,
And even with those scores, you don't get to you don't get the same, I think, shot at the tougher residency, right? The orthos, the germs, and the plastics, or something like that. You're limiting your field. If you want to go, if you're going to be family medicine and you've burned a couple years and you want to do something that's a little less competitive, then maybe the Caribbean might be a good route or a decent route at that point. But if hey, I want to do surgery, I want to be ortho this, or I want to be germ, that's a really tough hole to put yourself into.
yeah,
Um, I think. And can you do it? Yeah, there were people that did it in my class, but we're talking about small numbers, and so that's what I mean by why put yourself in that situation. Put the work up in up front, I would say, and then and go from there rather than the other way around like I did.
yeah. Well, you obviously put the work in, and I mean, being able to go through the steps and be able to dominate the steps is always an amazing feat. Which, at the end of the day, that means, you had the skills and the talent, and, hopefully the schooling helped a bit to be able to get you into that situation. But then, as you're coming out, you're, thinking about the future, and, I think I'd like to think that, PM&R is a pathway that at least is, much more respected, now than, in, decades past. And, looking at the numbers that have come out recently, I don't know. I always joke around. I'm like, ah, man, I don't think I would be able to match into many of these programs in PM&R these days. I'm glad that, I'm old enough to have gotten in when it was at least a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But what ended up bringing you to that route?
So get this, one of the on one of the flights, I'm going to step away to grab a charger real quick, but I I missed a flight. I didn't miss it. My flight on the way there was late, and I missed my connector. So my mom, she makes a call to a friend on the East Coast who happens to be a PM&R physician. She picks me up, and the next flight isn't for a couple of days for whatever reason. I think it was, and she's a PM&R physician, so she starts to talk to me about the field on the way from New York to Connecticut, where her home was.
That's amazing.
Dr. Badri, she's telling me about it. She's like, hey, you should look into it. It's an interesting field. So I did. I looked into it. And the more I learned about it, the more I kind of liked it. I kept it in the back of my mind. And that's what really got me going on it. I had never heard of it. As you know, a lot of physicians have never even heard of it. I remember meeting physicians in residency in other fields when we rotate together, and they didn't know what physical medicine rehabilitation was
Hmm.
is. So that's what got me going into it. And then of course you do your rotations, and I was deciding between anesthesia and I think PM&R, and I think radio. I think I had some interest in ER some as well. But and I had applied for anesthesia before my PM&R. And I think if you remember how the process works, I think at the beginning of September or whatever month it is, you put your applications in, and the interviews you get granted first come first serve.
Hmm.
I didn't put my application for PM&R till like midway through October. Yeah, it was like 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, and I still interviewed. No, I went and interviewed at UCLA where I ended up, and in Minnesota, RIC, and a couple other places, Miami, I think. And I thought I was going to end up in like, I remember thinking Miami. I thought I was going to end up in Miami. I like Miami and Dallas's program the best, and for me at least. And 'cause I didn't think I had a shot down at UCLA, but which is another issue, right? The reason I didn't think I had a shot is because it's tough for the California to get a California. They call it a PTAL, pre-authorization letter. It's tough for the foreign students to get those, so it's a problem, and that can be an impediment to getting a residency. So those types of things. That's another example of it.
Yeah, interesting. I don't think I ever knew that there was another step or layer for you to kind of get into residency in California.
Yeah, no, that's it. You need a pre-authorization letter, and it's a tough step. Yep.
Huh.
I mean, it's the government. Everything works slowly, so you got to make sure you get that letter too. So it's a little anxiety provoking.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so that was it. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like another thing I was going to highlight was that um, when I was talking about the quality of the students, and this is how close it is. There's a guy that studied with me, and I remember, programs always medical schools, they lose spots, like Drexel, for example, and people drop out or what have you, change career paths, so they need to fill those spots. Well, the Caribbean, they sometimes accept students from the Caribbean, and there was a guy with me studying with me, and we were pretty equal, and he got one of those spots, but his career trajectory changed completely after that. And he was, I looked, we keep in touch, and he ended up in ortho and Andrews Institute and stuff, things like that, which is nearly impossible to do otherwise. Coming out of the Caribbean, you could do it maybe, but it's really, really tough. And so, but what changed in his, background? Nothing. Nothing changed, or in terms of his inherently how smart he was or how hard he worked. Nothing changed, but his status as from a Caribbean to a U.S. student changed. And that's what those things, kind of things I like to highlight to kind of illustrate the example try to make.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it makes sense. And, I mean, I don't know. I always joked about it once. You would kind of you got into the upper, uh, into graduate schools and the like, and then as
Yeah.
you get into graduate schools, you meet people that went to different colleges, and obviously, in California, going to the UC system, like, it's good, but it's also pretty standard for California kids that do fairly well in high school that you end up at a UC system. And then you make your way, and we had the opportunity to live in New York and to live in Boston, and then you meet people that went to, like, schools that are internationally known, right? UC Davis is a great school, don't get me wrong. I'm very grateful that I went there, had a great time, learned a lot, got a great education. But there's a difference between UC Davis and Harvard. There's a difference between UC Davis and MIT and Cornell, and just in terms of the doors that a name like that opens, right? And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to, is like, there is an inherent, maybe conscious or unconscious bias that opens or closes a door, even if ever so slightly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, those programs, but they deserve that reputation. And if you get into one of those, you earned it. And I believe that. So, and that's not to. And I had a great education. I mean, like I said, at St. George's, just so I have no qualms and no regrets about having done that. But I still feel the way I do. I think for those reasons, and it's an important message. I think I kind of like to share.
Yeah.
If you end up in the Caribbean, that's perfectly fine too. That you just got to work hard and focus on the things that are important there. Just get focused on your studies. It's fine. It's a great education. I learned plenty there. I was a better student there than I was in undergrad. That's for certain. And ironically, I got a lot of credit in undergrad, but I didn't get any coming out of the Caribbean. It was so much better. I knew so much more coming out of St. George. But that's just the way it is, right? That's life. But
Yeah.
it was a great education, to be quite honest, and it was a great experience, man. You're kind of joking, like, oh, living on the beach, and I always make that joke that people always think I'm, I was just hanging out on the beach every day, studying or having a beer while I studied, and uh, that's exactly what it was. No, no, it wasn't that way at all. It was tough, man. It was tough. You're working hard. You're sitting in paradise, but you're in the library all day. You're hitting the
Yeah.
books, but you try to enjoy it here and there. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience. It takes you out to a different, right? You're young. You go to a different country, different culture, and just exposes you to different things. So just a different. That's what medicine does, right? It exposes you to different people and cultures, and makes you well-rounded. And this is just another way to do it.
Yeah. Nice.
Um, yeah, and so I think we left off. We were at the how I picked PM&R, and then I ended up getting matching over at UCLA, and
Yeah.
so that was great. That was wonderful. It was like a dream come true. As you know, like a lot of the Northern California kids, when they match, and they go to Southern California for undergrad, and the
Mm.
undergrad guys from Southern California, they come up to North. So I never, but I didn't do that. I stayed up North. So I was like, all right, great. This is my chance to live in
Yeah.
Southern California. It was great.
Yeah. You always got to taste the other side of the state, right? See what it's like, even if just for a little bit.
Yeah. And so then I did I did my residency there, uh, and then we ended up in fellowship. If you want to hear how I ended up in fellowship, I'd
I
love to
would
share.
I would love to. I think that's another thing that comes up often is, PM&R residents making way through. I mean, sometimes med students finding their way into PM&R and or into different specialties. But often the residents, as they're coming through, there's so many opportunities right ahead of you, right? I mean, especially a field as diverse as PM&R, where you can do a multitude of subspecialization just for inpatient, or many different paths to creating a great outpatient life for yourself. How did you think about it as you were kind of winding your way through getting through residency? I mean, obviously, UCLA, West LA VA, PM&R program, great education, already pretty good exposure to a lot of pain, a lot of musculoskeletal medicine. Really, really, really strong outpatient thing. I say that as having been a fellow there,
Yep.
knew the residents, knew a lot of it. So firsthand experience, being able to say those things, but then, making that decision to, what, I want to do a fellowship, and then deciding on what kind of fellowship to do.
Yeah, I knew I liked I knew I liked I knew I liked the MSK aspect of. That's why I like PM&R. And then I got exposed. I'll skip straight to the fellowship. I got exposed to the fellowship route really late because my rotation in interventional spine was really late. It was like in the last half of
Mm.
my senior year of residency. So actually, the match process had already happened, had already taken place, and Dr. Jay Jung, who I rotated with, and Dr. Fish, they when I rotated with them, we had such a great time. And long story short, they kind of surprised me at the end and said, "Hey, listen, what'd you think?" I said, "Oh, man, it was wonderful. I wish I knew about it beforehand." And they said, "Well, Dr. Jung calls me one day. He says, "Hey, listen, what if I said we have a spot open for you? Would you take it?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?" And so, I jumped on it, but we had a fellow already. I was ready to take a spot, and they created that second spot, and that's how I got it. Actually, it was like really late in the year, and really fortuitous. I really fortunate for me. I'm really appreciative of it. But that's how I got that spot. It was really late. I knew I didn't want to do any other fellowship at that time. I was thinking I was going to go into some type of job where I would do outpatient MSK based. And it would be a non-intervention probably.
Mm.
But when I did that rotation, and I really, really enjoyed working with my hands, quick hit procedures. I didn't like, going back to med school, I didn't like surgery because it was your you're on your feet for hours at a time. I didn't like the hospital. I think it's too hectic. I didn't like nurses, ORs. Not that I don't like nurses. I just don't like the hecticness of it all, personally. And then I get into this interventional field where, the quick hit procedures, 5, 10, 15 minutes, and my back's not killing me. And they're done in 5 minutes. I like the pace of the procedures as well, right?
Mm.
So that's what really appealed to me. I don't know. I like to hear when you decided to go in and
Oh man, my story's a little different. I actually knew going into residency that I was going to be going into pain fellowship. So
okay,
my path was quite a bit different than yours was. I actually love the way that you describe it though, because you described like the hecticness of the hospital wasn't something you liked. And
yeah,
my memory, especially of fellowship, was were extremely hectic, chaotic days of just constantly running in circles at the UCLA Surgery Center, and sometimes it was you and I, working out of one room, and we had quite a few patients, and running back and forth to get patients checked in and seen and back in the room. Um, and so I think it's a funny word. I understand what you mean, but fellowship was actually quite had its hectic parts as well too, and particularly those procedure days.
yeah, yeah. I think the training is a little bit different. I think you agree though. Now out in the outpatient setting, it's a lot more controllable and a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that's one of the things to point out to all of the people that are in training, right? I mean, when you're in charge of your own schedule, when you're in charge of the way that you want to treat patients and the way that you want to set up your clinic, you can create that pace that appeases you, that makes you happy, and that you're comfortable with, so that it doesn't feel hectic, so that it doesn't feel chaotic and crazy. So that's I don't think I actually knew that you didn't realize early that you wanted to do intervention. Um,
Yeah, no, it is true. I haven't thought about this in a long time, and it's been but uh, yeah, I didn't get exposed to it very early. I think that was part of it. But I and the funny thing is about all this ironic. When I picked PM&R, going back, the part of the decision was I remember that Dr. Bajwa on the way back to her home in Connecticut, she tells me, "Well, you can also work with your hands, do some procedures and injections, and work with the spine and things like that." And I thought, "Oh, that sounds really fun, actually." And so that kind of turned me on towards it as well, um, and start to consider it. And so, right, you would think that would have been my mindset since day from the start of residency, but um, no, it wasn't. And I think part of the reason, yeah, it just wasn't. But at the forefront of my mind. But as soon as I got into it, I really loved it. There
yeah.
was no doubt that this is something I have to eventually ended up doing. I was actually really bummed. I think that's part of the reason why Dr. Jung probably opened it up, was I was like, gosh, I wish, I was lamenting openly, like, well, I don't understand why I got this rotation so late. And now, get a chance to work with both Dr. Jung and Dr. Fish. The other thing, they made it so fun, and it just made it interesting to work. And I just love the environment and the setting, and it was just, I instantly fell in love with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a great mentor obviously, sets you up for, a lot of, a lot of easy paths to love a field. It's funny the way you're telling the story. Like I remember being a fellow working with Dr. Fish and Dr. Jung
Yeah.
and having some of the students rotate. And there was actually or not students, one of the residents. It was actually one of the chiefs was rotating with us, and it was probably later in the year. I mean, maybe even spring by that point. Um, this poor, I say kid, young man that's finishing his residency, going on to be about to sign his first, or he had already signed his contract to work. He had always thought he wanted to do inpatient, took on a great position at a brand new inpatient rehabilitation hospital, did the rotation with us, and this poor guy almost threw away his contract. He was like, "I'm having so much fun." He was like, "This is like you guys make this so much fun. Like we're doing great stuff for patients. Get to you do work that you really enjoy and appreciate. Having fun with it." Um, Thankfully we convinced him that he had already made his life decision and he had already signed a contract, so he should stay with it. And it's worked out quite well for him. I think he's actually the director of that rehab hospital now. But yeah, I mean, it's just like kind of a similar story to where you were, where you just didn't get exposed to it at the right time, and thankfully it worked out for you. And probably most importantly, thankfully it worked out for you, so that it worked out for us and for our patients, because now we have a phenomenal person to be able to help serve this community.
No, I was, I appreciate that. Those are kind words. But the other day when I thought about it, I was like, man, what a break I caught. I appreciated it at the time, but I appreciate it even more in hindsight. It really changed the trajectory of everything I do for a living. I can't imagine doing this without the procedure component of it. I just enjoy it so much, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it. And so um, I just can't imagine not having done the fellowship. I imagine maybe if I hadn't done it that cycle, I probably would have gone back and done one. You know,
Yeah.
it worked out really well for me. So that's all thanks to those guys down there.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's what's the saying? Better lucky than good. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes things just fall into your lap, and it happens for a reason.
I'll take it.
Obviously,
Yeah,
opportunities open when people see something in you too, right? I mean, I don't think Dr. Jung would have tried to figure out how to get funding for a second fellow position if he didn't think that you would do a great job with that role.
yeah, yeah. No, we enjoyed each other's company, so it was a good time, and so that, I think that ended. My fellowship ended 2015, summer 2015, and after
Mm.
that, I had I wanted to come back to the Bay Area at that time, and so um, I started interviewing a few different places, and ultimately I decided I want to go back to the Bay, and there's a department there that had a couple of our old UCLA grads, and I made it comfortable, and I ended up taking the spot of someone who's down there now, Dr. Alan Chen, and so he vacated that spot for a spot in New York. He worked at, I think he went to Cornell, right?
Yeah, the Cornell Columbia program. Yeah,
The joint program. So I slid into that position in there. So that was a nice transition for both them and myself, and it gave me a chance to move back into the Bay Area. And so I worked for a couple years there, like I said, and it was going well. And then I met my wife, and kind of convinced me to move to Sacramento. And I think the other question people have is, especially for the California or the people who are on the West Coast, are exposed to the Kaiser system and what I thought about Kaiser, um, and the ups and downs. Um, and I have the unique position to be able to kind of juxtapose that with private practice. I can get into that, but ultimately, I ended up in private practice here in Sacramento, spine and nerve, in 2018, I think it was March, and I've been here since maybe 2017. I forget. It's my fourth year, finishing my third. But but yep.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
those are
well,
good
so,
schools to
well,
join.
so I mean, yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes for, obviously a great story. I mean, every story is a great story. And, I think it sheds a lot of light on, a path that, I think there's a lot of people that can commiserate with, or commiserate is probably the wrong word, or, relate to. But as, I mean, as we're looking forward now, like, so what are the things now that you're, I know that, obviously you've been on the podcast before, and we've talked a lot about different things from, different injections to neuromodulation to regenerative medicine. There's a lot of amazing things that are happening in our field, right? I mean, we are extremely blessed to be, in this field, in this era where there are so many innovations happening on a regular basis. But what are the things that really have your attention? Like, where are you kind of, spending your time, learning, educating yourself on some of the new and upcoming treatment options for patients, and things that you want to be able to kind of, continue to grow into the
Yeah,
future.
I think you hit the nail on the head. This field is, gosh, I mean, we say this maybe obviously we're biased, we're in it, but what a wonderful field to be in. It really is like the minimally invasive procedures. Like you said, it's innovative, right? So there's new procedures coming out all the time, and I'm just trying to gobble up and learn all of them, just so I can help my patients. So we're doing mild, we're doing Vertiflex. Um, I'm focusing on a lot of the regenerative medicine and that kind of focus on the spine as well as the peripheral joints, musculoskeletal, and trying to keep up with that aspect of medicine as it grows, the minimally invasive procedures that are coming in, because that's where medicine is going. You don't, nobody wants to be cut open, nobody wants to do those open surgical procedures now, and this field is just at the forefront of that with the image guided procedures that we're offering. So I'm trying to hone my skills and try to be the best at every one of those procedures, and try to learn every one so I can offer my add to my skill set, and just and not have a hole in my swing, so to speak. But if I were to kind of narrow it down, I think as I learned those procedures, the minimally invasive procedures that come out, I think I really trying to focus on some of the regenerative medicine. If I can expand that part of our practice together, I think I'd be really happy with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? There's so much, there's so many options, there's so many ways that we can help patients through, very, very tiny incisions, if an incision at all, right? Many of them are just through, a relatively moderately sized needle that can do amazing things. And so, and then now you talked about the whole world of, orthobiologics and regenerative medicine, and like thinking of, where that field has come in just the past, decade or so.
We're
Like it's
excited.
pretty amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we're all picking it up in our practice. We're trying to do. I think everyone should be doing everything because we have the capability to do it. And that's a great thing about our practice. There's no stepping on each other's toes. We're all doing the procedures, and we have the patients to share. So that makes it really fun, doesn't it? It
I,
makes
I I love the fact that we have people, pushing in all different directions. We have, we have those options. We have the ability to be able to, lean on each other, right? I mean, I think that's at the end of the day, that's the best thing about group practice is, as you're learning, you bring it back, and we all get together, and you get to tell us about it. And, as Dr. Carvelis learns something new, he brings it back, and we all get to learn about it. The same thing with Dr. Hastings and Dr. Reddy, and on down the line, right? Everybody kind of, explores new things. We all continue, aggregating that
another
education and that skill set. And,
That's 100% true. Yeah, it's exactly you're saying exactly what I hear from other physicians who are solo. They always lament the fact that they don't have other physicians on their level. They might have MAs and or what have you, but they don't have another physician to speak to, bounce ideas off of, and we have that here.
yeah,
It's a great benefit of a group practice. And so here's the other thing, right? So we happen to train with some similar training, but Dr. Carvalho's trained somewhere else, or maybe and Julie Hastings comes in, and she comes in from a different place and trains from somewhere else, and so we can all take a little bit of training from somebody else and put it together and try to maximize our own abilities, right?
yeah,
And that's beautiful. And so we pick each other's brains, make each other better, and so that's a great thing about group practice. Is a great benefit about group,
absolutely.
uh, and so yeah, I think that's valuable to know too for people who are out there trying to figure out which route they want to go and what some of the pros and cons.
Yeah, no, 100% right. I mean, I think about, the difference that, each of us have made in the, 6 years or whatever it's been since we came out of fellowship. And, if I think about like where would I be? And I think I'm a relatively, aggressive in terms of trying to accumulate education kind of person, and skill sets, but I'm exponentially better than I would be otherwise because of having you and Nick and the rest of the team as a part of our group, right? If I was doing it on my own,
Nick and you.
oh, I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would,
Nick, yeah.
for sure. Like, I mean, of course, you do things for years, you do, thousands of procedures, you go to courses, you read papers, you do everything, you're going to get better.
Right.
But so much better because of the fact that you have other people there to, just, like I said, just keep kind of multiplying that education together and really, I think pushing it, right? Pushing each other, right? I mean, I see you do a cool procedure. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to see, I want to do that or something like along those lines, right? I mean, probably both of us, it's more when Dr. Corrales does something out of the box, we're like, oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, maybe we should figure that out.
Right. Yeah, right, exactly. No, no, but it does. I think what you said is exactly, it's exactly right. It's exactly true. So it's great fun being able to work in a practice like that. I think that makes it a lot more easier to learn too, or want to learn. And so I'm appreciative of the fact that's for certain.
Well, I'm appreciative of you being so open and honest with telling your story, and I think it's going to be a story that brings a lot of value to everybody out there. And so, but in closing, are there any kind of final thoughts? I mean, like I said, our average, I don't know, I always say our average person, but I don't know if it's true. But I think if we aggregate the listeners, we got med students and early residents are make up a large population of the people that listen to our podcast. If you have something to leave people at that stage of their careers with, what do you have for them?
I think, yeah, at the risk of reiterating what I said before, I think for a medical student, um, if you're a medical student, you're already doing the right things. You're on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. I think a lot of the anxiety at that stage is trying to figure out, make sure you pick the right field, right? Um, I, I would love to hear your advice. Mine would be, I think if you're in medical school, you're obviously a thoughtful person. You try to kind of go with your gut. You narrow down some of the things you like, what you don't like. It's really tough at that stage trying to figure out trying to project your life, what you want it to be in the future. Your priorities change. You get married, you have kids, time, things change, right? How you value what you value also changes. So you do the best you can. A doctor is a doctor is a doctor, and at the end of the day, you're going to enjoy doing what you're doing because you're helping people. That you have the altruistic mentality, and I think um, it's going to come through. You just try to make a list, try to think about it. You pick your field and you go forward, and try not to doubt it. If you're a resident coming out, and let's say, especially if you're in physical medicine rehab and PM&R, going into pain, you're I think your decisions are going to be: do I join a group practice? Am I going to try to go solo? Am I going to join a big healthcare organization? I could kind of circle back to that. I worked at Kaiser, which is on the West Coast, is a big healthcare organization and a closed system practice. It was fine. It was great. I worked with some great guys there. The department was great, and that's why I went there. The physicians I was going to be working with there, the ladies and gentlemen I'd work with, they were great to work with. Kaiser, the benefits, they make the pluses, I would say, are they make the work-life balance really good for you. Um, like I said, when your priorities change, when you're older, when you got kids, you don't have to worry about the business aspect of things. You see the patient done, and you move on. You don't have to worry about the business side of things, and that's helpful for a lot of people. They take care of your retirement benefits, things like disability insurance. They take good care on that end. I think some of they make life a lot really easy. I think the golden handcuffs is the joke there. They put the golden handcuffs on you. The downside, I would say, you have to be okay with, how do I put this? It's your toolbox can shrink a little bit. Um, so they partition, what departments do which procedures. For example, spinal cord stimulator was done at San Francisco. I wasn't allowed to do more Ram Martinez, so that was my skill set shrinking there, and I had to be careful. If you go too long, you lose the skill altogether. So that was one of the drawbacks. A couple of the other things you might not appreciate at the time, but even though they get you back on the back end with great benefits and pension program, things like that, your salary might be a little bit lower at the beginning of your career or midway through as compared to private practice or other positions outside of Kaiser, something along those lines. And then I would say the other drawbacks, besides the skill set and the lower salary, is that you don't have much room to operate outside of Kaiser. Can't go and do guest lectures. You can't do, medical legal work. You can't do things like that. And so that's one of the drawbacks. So it does kind of confine you to kind of pigeonholes you a little bit. Now I don't. I can only speak to my experience there. I thought it was. Having said that, I still enjoyed it. It was great. I didn't leave because I was unhappy. So I have to point that out. I left out of necessity. My wife made me, and I think those are some of the important things. I think I was happy there. You could be happy there, but if you're more of a go-getter and you want to build something, I think maybe Kaiser's not your place, and you want to expand. Maybe that's not the place. But if hey, listen, I'm okay showing up 9 to 5, kind of doing my thing, see my patients, not worry about it, anything else, just deliver great patient care, and then that's definitely could be a place for you. It kind of reminded me of the VA a little bit, right? And then we all know about academic centers. It was, I would compare it more closely to the VA setting. And for PM&R, that's easy to, if you're a resident, you know what to relate it to in terms of the type of pace, the work pace. And then if you talk to your attendings, the pay, salary, all that stuff. So you can kind of extrapolate from there. Kaiser's really similar.
Yeah. Well, I think the best piece of advice you gave in the entire interview was that you listened to your wife.
Happy wife, happy life. Huh?
Happy wife, happy life. Which I think is probably the perfect way to end our conversation today. Because I want to let you get back to your wife, and I think it's something that that we can all appreciate, that being able to keep those close to us in our lives happy, obviously always is important for our quality of life. And so quite possibly the best advice we can give any of the anybody out there: happy wife, happy life.
Man, thanks for having me on. Have we done one of these for you?
No.
All right, we're gonna switch this around. Yeah, ask you the question. We're gonna do it.
Yeah, maybe one of these days. I like being in the interviewer seat.
Yeah, right.
All right, everybody, stay tuned for those legal disclaimers, and we will talk to you next week.